another episode of the Higher Level Podcast. So this evening, joining James Dillon and myself, we have George Hardwick, current Cage Warriors lightweight champion. It's fight week, George. It's fast approaching. Are you just excited now to get to the weekend and get into another fight?
At this point, I kind of appreciate, because normally when you're training and you've got stuff to do, you kind of get it done. But at this point where I'm down on calories, I can kind of lie in a lot easier and just sleep or chill out way easier. It's like a much deeper sleep, and I kind of just appreciate, I can lie in bed, close my eyes, and then it's just 2 hours gone by, just snoozing and being chilled out. And then when I do my little workouts, I feel really sharp. But then it's just only opening the tap just enough.
See, it's the little things in life, mate. A good night's sleep, you can't beat it.
No, I can't. I'm making sure I'm lying in quite a bit because it'd be not late by regional show standards, because they can go on till 3 a.m. But this will be quite a bit later than some of my other fights. It could be 11 or half 11, something like that. So I'm just making sure I lie in, take naps.
Yeah, that's it.
To peak in the evening.
So obviously, as you're saying there, George, how does the rest of this week look for you then? Obviously, it's about making weight and stuff like that. But what else? What will the rest of the week look like for you, leading up to Sunday?
Luckily I can keep it quite chilled. It's just I just work out on the evening where I kind of open the tap, whatever it is, whether it's the pads or been doing drills and drill sparring, and then but not too much. Because the temptation is, this is the point where you're peaking and you feel like you're fast, you feel really good. So as soon as you start working out, you feel, fast, explosive. You've got the body that you've been training for in terms of performance. It's tempting to really just let loose and do absolutely loads, but it doesn't help by the time of the fight.
Is that what it's about? Is it just conserving to make sure that peak moment happens when that bell rings for the fight?
Yeah, and it's just and just having the right amount and not being between states, thinking I have to be busy doing all this. I'm either completely almost like a vegetable, just doing nothing, or I bring it up just that amount for the workout. I also get a fair few hot baths in, just as kind of I'm not cutting the weight yet. Rehydrating straight away. But it's just kind of practice for the cut. I think that's important, is kind of getting that practice and getting used to whatever cutting method you're doing.
Is it letting your... Sorry, on you go, James.
With these sessions that you're talking about, just open the tap and stuff like that, are you regulating that yourself, or is your coach keeping an eye on that and stuff? Just do enough and then maybe tell you to start slowing it down, or do you know what I mean? Are you just kind of based on how you feel at the time, or have you got somebody looking after that for you?
Yeah, it's just between me and Harry, and it's kind of just based on what we've done on fight weeks before, whether it's been too much or too little, and you kind of just have to go by feel.
Yeah,
I'm dieting, but it's not grim dieting, so I've got a bit of energy to play with. I think if I was completely calorie restricted, it would take it back even less. But it's just, so as an example, Monday night, do the warm up, do 20 minutes of drills, but quite sharp, and then just 2 5s of almost like drill sparring, where I'm visualizing strikes that you can't really throw in sparring. Throwing the elbows but pulling them. The partner's being pretty cooperative. Just doing 2 5s of that, putting a few positions that might come up in the fight, or likely to come up, and then just a little hit on the bags, and then just dialing it back after that and tuning it down. So it's about an hour, but it's kind of bringing yourself up to the point where you would be for a sparring session, and there when you'd continue for 5 rounds. But just once you hit that point, just stopping it there. whether that's the pads or rolling, whatever it is.
And you mentioned obviously Harry there. We spoke to Harry recently, and Harry's just come off the back of a big win, a fantastic performance. How Steve Amiable got to the end of that fight, I'll never know. It looked like Harry hit him with everything but the kitchen sink. Harry comes off a great performance and a win. Is that a motivator for you leading into your fight? Do you take something away from watching your brother perform like that?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think one of the main differences now is like, you know, as we were getting into fighting, it was kind of like a pressure bubble thing, the whole fight experience. Just being in the warm-up rooms is like a draining experience, waiting for the fight or waiting for my brother's fight. But now it's all fun. You know, it's not, we're in the warm-up room waiting and it's mentally fatiguing. It's just its own fun. Doing the warm-ups, whether I'm doing the warm-up myself to getting ready to fight or holding the pads for Harry and, you know, the crack before that, it's its own fun experience. And then the fight just arrives there. I'm stepping in the cage or Harry's stepping in the cage. But yeah, it's definitely motivating, especially that good a performance as well.
Yeah, it was a great performance. And it sounds like you've messaged here about that change about. It just sounds like experience, like you yourself and your brother are just now, you're gaining that, you've experience now, you're obviously into the big shows, you've fought. It just sounds like that's an element of experience coming through as well. Yeah,
we've had because, you know, that little change in almost the feel of it's just been fun in the backstage, warming up, getting ready. The whole thing's been almost, obviously it's nervy, but it's fun. Like I remember warming up for the Kyle Driscoll fight. Normally, warm-ups, you're like a bag of nerves, and I've been not like to any kind of debilitating extent, but it's that kind of unpleasant nerviness as you're going through your warm-up. But I remember for the Driscoll fight, and I think Harry was like this for his fight with Amiable, it was just fun. You kind of just expressing your body at its peak. There's no other way to describe that than fun. Even just in warm-ups, blasting the pads.
See that change, that change that you mentioned the word fun there, having that experience going into the cage versus you're saying before it's no debilitating nerves, but the nerves are there. Does it have a notable effect that going into the cage?
It probably does. Like it probably has a positive effect. Something I don't try and think about too much is whether this has a positive effect or that has a negative effect when you're going in there, because you can beat yourself up over stuff. You just need to be in there. But yeah, and it's just a bit of a difference in mentality as I get more experience, because there'll always be this kind of pre-fight state where you just want the fight to be done because you're dieting, you're training really hard.
Yeah.
Or on the fight day, there's the nerves, and you kind of want them to be done with. But now it's kind of a different way, even say weeks out, and I've got hard session on hard session. Not thinking, I want these weeks of training to be done and then I can do some normal life stuff. I'm kind of appreciating each session is an expression of my body at its peak. You know, as I'm training towards a fight, the weights come down. That's me at my peak in terms of physical performance, how I feel, just how sharp in terms of technique come together. And it's just appreciating that and enjoying that in those moments. Because I know when I'm like 20, 30 years down the line, that's what I look back at. It's not necessarily the achievements themselves. It's just having that capability to express these martial arts and stuff. And conversely, because I'm thinking about that now, you know, just enjoying expressing myself physically, the fight comes a lot quicker.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Are you feeling, both you guys are fairly active? Like it doesn't seem like there was that long ago you just won the title and now you're out again getting your first defence. Do you think that's kind of playing a part in how you're talking about that state you're in the warm up and stuff like that, just being out regular and being exposed to everyone and stuff like that?
I think that helps as well. Is you know, the activity of cornering as well is part of getting used to that fight experience. You know, Harry's not fought at the Indigo, but each time I fought at the Indigo. I fought twice there before Harry has. To get a workout in, he's blasted pads as soon as he's got there. He's blasted pads in the warm-up room, which probably gets him accustomed to it even. Yeah. But yeah, I like being active. Just, you've only got so many years to compete, and I want to be active during them. I've seen some people win Cage Warriors titles, and they expect that UFC call to come, and they've lost like 9 months, a year of the career, just waiting for a call. I can't see myself doing that.
How many times would you like to fight a year, ideally?
Ideally, well, this is almost ideal, like 3, but provided the fights aren't wars, or I'm not getting injuries from them, why not 4 or 5?
Yeah. I've got one more thing. I'll double back a wee bit. See, when we spoke to your brother, you were talking about how you're obviously highly involved with coaching each other. And before you were at Cage Warriors, you were performing well and getting results and stuff on Bellator. When you're getting these results and these performances, he's getting like a confidence in this system, but the way he's training, he's turning up like he's always turning up and performing well. So he's getting like a confidence just by what we're doing is working. Has there ever been a point where you've been like, I'm trying to figure this out, we're trying to figure out what we're doing here, experimenting with shit, and now it's like you're getting to a stage now where there's like a hard body evidence that the way you guys are training and the ways you're thinking about and approaching everything's paying off?
Yeah, that's a massive thing, that, because we know it's not guesswork by this point. And with the whole thing winning the belt, more than the namesake of the belt, what was big for me, the biggest gratification off that was the validation of what we're doing and the validation of the gym. Because when I fought Driscoll, I'm fighting someone from AKA.
Yeah.
And we're training in a little gym down a back alley in Middlesbrough, where half of it's held together by tape. But we know the methods we're doing are working because we're getting that validation. Harry's beating top contenders. I've won the belt.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That was kind of where we were. It was always like, not like a second guess, but you're like, oh, we're fighting against a guy for Jackson's or ATT or these super gyms that they kind of ram them down your throat to an extent that if you need to be good, you need to go there. And it's like you're trying to figure out this system for your own students and stuff like that. And there's no better validation when you're out and beating these guys.
Yeah, it's a big example is, and he's one of he's my favorite fighter ever, really, in MMA, is Demetrius Johnson. He's kind of like exception to it. He just spent his whole career training with AMC with Matt Hume.
Yeah,
he didn't have a massive roster of pro fighters to train with. He'd like train with Bibiano Fernandez, and throughout his whole title reign, he was just training with the people in his gym. Most of the people he was training with are coming from full-time jobs and then giving him rounds.
Yeah,
it certainly worked out for Demetrius, and given his last performance, it's still working because that was a spectacular finish in his last fight.
Yeah, I was buzzing for that. I think that was like the first time he's travelled to train for a bit. I think he did a few weeks with Cejudo.
That's right, aye. That's right. I think he spoke about that on Rogan, I believe.
But yeah, it's kind of, people want to go to the mega gyms and just think being around in the mega gyms will just automatically level them up. But you don't need a big gym to faint, to have really good cardio, to have good footwork, to drill things correctly. There's loads of things that you don't necessarily need a mega gym to do.
Yeah, there's evidence. I mean, look at Mark Diakiese's a great example of somebody who went out, trained at AT&T, and they discussed the fact that when he was out there, he was just another body. So he was just following, I think it was AT&T's curriculum, but no specialised training to him. And he ultimately ended up coming back to the gym he started with. So it does show there that going to those massive gyms sometimes can be to your own detriment.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, the saying, iron sharpens iron. But, iron can break iron as well. If it's just, if all your rounds are with other tough guys with stuff to prove, and you just kind of bashing each other day in, day out, that can eat, so many injuries can happen to that. And then that eats into your time to actually improve your technique and break your technique down.
I don't envy MD running a big gym. And James, this is kind of aimed over at you because you're dealing with multiple guys, different personalities, different egos. There must be days, James, when you're literally just pulling your hair out. It's like, obviously you're a father, you've got kids, and I can imagine it's not too much different when you're dealing with a gym full of young men, full of testosterone, ego, trying to prove themselves.
It's a nightmare. There's definitely like a tipping point where you can have too many fighters. Like I try and keep a good ratio of coach to fighter type of thing. So then now I've got maybe, I don't think I've got any more than 10 pros right now. And some of the guys are only fighting twice a year. And I've got like guys who want to get busier and stuff like that. But when you go to some of these bigger gyms, we've obviously had Stevie at TriStar a couple of times. We've got guys who are in and out the gym who've been to other good gyms, and a lot of the time just a number there. Was the way I coach is really based on personal development. It's about try to style everything towards that one person and trying to get better every session, and not just being like putting them through the meat grinder where they're bashing each other up. Try to get better in between fights and stuff like that. But there's definitely a point where there's an oversaturation. Unless you've got multiple very good coaches, you can outgrow the space really quick. So I try and keep like a wee group of 10. I've had guys approach me before and basically turn them down, just be like, I don't have time to take on another pro guy just now and stuff like that. But it's a weird thing, man, because it used to be almost like a set in stone rule. Once you get to a certain level, you need to go to America and shit like that. And what you're saying about Demetrius Johnson with Matt Hume, I think when you get the proper relationship between a fighter and a coach, you don't need to go anywhere. Do you know what I mean? I think that's more important than the rest of it. As long as you've got a level of intelligence where you're up to speed with the current stuff that's happening in the game, or the direction the game's taking, even in relation to your own weight class and stuff like that, and who's running about you in that weight class, then you can tailor everything towards that person with like a very, very small group. Some of the best training we done was during COVID, when we only had like 2 or 3 pro guys in getting ready for fights. Do you know what I mean? There was no classes. There was like me, if it was Danny getting ready for a fight with a couple bodies in, if it was Stevie getting ready to come back, do you know what I mean? Like those type of sessions. And we just kind of carried a lot of that over when COVID and the lockdown went away. We just carried that back over into our pro team session, which is like, it's kind of invite only now. There's never more than, if there's 2 weight classes in at the same time, and there's never more than it, like maybe 6 or 8 in each weight class, just so everybody in the room's getting work. You know what I mean? It's not like a class situation. And you know, when you go to, you've heard these horror stories about guys going to these big American gyms, and there's a room full of other guys in your weight class there, and straight away you're a target, and there's a room full of egos there. And it just becomes pretty much fighting for your life every day, which is detrimental to development. You end up really good at either surviving, or you get known for being tough because you can take a kicking, but you're not getting better at finishing fights or adapting during fights and stuff like that, or breaking defensive and offensive cycles. You know what I mean? You're either just getting a doing or you're winning.
Yeah, I can see that. You know, it can almost be like what's the term? Like a loafing to it. You just assume you're with all these big guys and you're getting hard rounds, and each round is like taking absolutely loads out of you. You probably just assume, oh, I'm doing enough. But if you're not really breaking down or making your game link together with those rounds, it probably isn't helping you absolutely loads. Like, where the opposite, you know, I was saying, like maybe 2 people in a session, there's not many people to train with. You kind of have to respond to that limitation and get creative, which makes you make those links between different techniques, different training tools. Like there was one session where before I was training to fight Kyle Driscoll, And it's in my head he's training with Makachev and he's got Khabib and his coach. He's got this massive team around him. In that one session, it was just me and an amateur featherweight at the gym called Zanya, who hadn't fought yet, but he's just comes in, grafts. I'm like, I've just got him for a session. So I had to get quite creative with how I'm drilling, the different positions I'd put myself in with him, different types of positional goals. I'm just, instead of thinking, wow, I haven't got this partner or that partner, just making the most out of this one partner I've got.
That's where that level of intelligence comes in. Like you could have easily just been like, I will just do 5-5s a day. I'm fighting 5-5s. We'll spar 5-5s. But you're like, no, you're going to start in this position. You're going to try and do this, and I'm going to try and stop it and stuff. I think that's what's missing with a lot of coaches are very generic. Do you know what I mean? They're like, they'll teach techniques and then they'll spar, or they think they're drilling. And a lot of the time they're not even really drilling. They're doing sequences and stuff like that. They're not gamifying stuff. Again, I think if you've got like a small tight group of smart people who know how to train smart and game plan and pick apart other people's games, you can obviously do pretty well. And I think you and your brother obviously come across as, you guys seem to have that. Do you know what I mean? You can see it when you're watching, you can hear it when you're cornering each other and stuff like that, and even talking about fighting.
Yes, and whatever you're doing is obviously clearly working. I wanted to bring something up we spoke to your brother about. So there's a ruling higher level James has, and it's about brothers sparring. So it's he's banned it for his own reasons, because sometimes the sparring gets a bit too intense. So we spoke about this with Harry. I'd love to get your thoughts on sometimes how it can go sparring with your brother if he gets you with a good shot, and does it sometimes escalate?
I think there's more of a level of escalation, not to any kind of malicious way, just in more of a competitive way, because there's that comfort with it. We know what we can push each other with. If it's someone else come to give us rounds, he's come from his job as maybe he's been working as an electrician all day and he's come to give us rounds. We don't want to bash each other. I don't want to, if he gets me with a jab, I don't want to lash out or be a div. Whereas with me and Harry, we've got that comfort. It's kind of that comfort to kind of escalate with each other. And plus Harry's quite an escalator. He needs his points back. Even if I've pushed him to the fence for 20 seconds, it's not like a full takedown or some full strike. But an example that springs to mind was, we were talking about gamesmanship at this point, and if say in a fight situation, if someone fouls you and the ref's not doing anything about it, instead of sitting and complaining, you can kind of get that back. That was just in my head at that point. And I remember in a spar, Harry inside low kicks us and it comes up a bit high. And then I do it again within 10 seconds. We start sparring again. I do it again within 10 seconds. And the idea wasn't any kind of, I need to kick him in the dick. It was more just practicing the gamesmanship.
So almost like a small revenge mission you were on there.
Yeah. Well, thinking back, it wasn't really like, I need to get that back. It was more just, we were talking about this the other day, and it's a really good chance to practice it.
I wonder if Harry was thinking about that conversation he's had in the days before and was expecting it to come back.
Possibly. So what we had to do was, we'd always tell each other what techniques we were thinking about. We'd be sat in the car or wherever, and we're talking about different techniques we've been trying. Mm-hmm. And I think we'd spar, and then it would happen loads where we'd both try the same thing at the same time, or it wouldn't work to any level because we've been discussing it with each other so much. So we started to not tell each other as much stuff. Yeah. Obviously with game plans for fights and what have you, we're always breaking it down, but we started to almost keep secrets on what we're working on.
Yeah.
It's obviously not big things. We're not changing the game every time we spar, but just little setups or little feints or what have you. just keeping it secret from each other. So we have a chance to land it.
Start sending each other videos of shadow boxing in the wrong stance and stuff. Sprawling.
Back and forth. I get. We should actually move on to the fight on Sunday. So obviously, first defence of the title, in there with Chris Bungard. So I'd love to get your thoughts on Chris as an opponent. And again, it's always the thing with Cage Warriors. When you're a champion, you mentioned there earlier about the UFC, that is always looming overhead, and it can happen any time, especially depending on how the fight goes and how you look in the fight. So Chris is an opponent. I'm assuming you've had a chance to look at Chris and break things down and where you see potentially the fight going.
So he can be quite unorthodox on the feet and not the cleanest, but it needs to be respected. It's 4-ounce gloves, elbows and knees can cause a lot of damage. Obviously, his main thing that he wants is to take the back, which is, his biggest wins are more off of back takes and rear nakeds. It's just kind of not hanging with him too much there. Yep. He's quite similar to some past opponents. My past 4 opponents, it's been more the case of defend the takedowns and just break and strike and break them down that way. That's probably what this fight's going to look like.
Yeah, and in terms of the implications about, I mean, I know a lot of guys are going to say, and you might say this yourself, that you're trying not to think about that, but it has got to pop into your head that potentially a win here. The UFC are always looking. Cage Warriors has produced great guys for them over the years, and potentially you could be the next one.
It does pop into my head, but there's something I've always thought where I've not been that good at looking into the future, which a lot of people would say is a negative. But in situations like that, this is really good. I struggle looking past like the next day, what I'm going to do tomorrow, the next few hours. I'm outside of my training schedule. I don't really know what I'm going to do with myself, even like removed within a few days or a week. But thinking about that now, it's kind of a blessing.
Yeah,
I'm really bad at forward thinking.
I guess it just doesn't put that additional pressure on, which it's got to. And next question, probably the most important question I'm going to ask you: the dad dancing, as you've said in yourself in a post. When did this come about? Because you're cutting some moves up there. Are you practicing the dance moves before fights and working out where you've got to pull it, or is this just a spontaneous thing that happens?
See, after a fight, it's pretty spontaneous. But I think it was the first time I danced in a warm-up was when I fought Nicolo Soli in Bellator in Italy. I just remember thinking, oh, that's pretty good, that. Because sometimes I've done this in fights before where I start my warm-up with technical stuff. I start my warm-up with generic mobility into shadow boxing, into pads. And if you've got that slight bit of nerviness and slight bit of kind of hesitation in you, it kind of compounds as you're doing more shadow boxing, as you're doing pads and drills. That kind of stiffness compounds and gets worse over the warm-up. Whereas I was just doing some dancing to Michael Jackson before that fight with Nicolo Soli in Bellator. And I was just loose. I don't know if it's the dance itself. I don't know if it's just because it's something a bit daft. It takes that kind of inhibition away. Yeah. And then as soon as you start shadow boxing and hitting the pads in the warm-up, it's just looser. It's more crisp.
It brings you back to that word you used earlier when you were talking about leading into fights. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. It's fun. It's entertaining. People enjoy it. It sort of takes it's just an enjoyable thing, and it's a good laugh to watch as well.
So and it's become a little pre-fight ritual, kind of ritual. But before I start the warm-up, it's been the same song each time. It's been "Crazy in Love" by Beyonce, featuring Jay-Z. I'll just stick that in my headphones and dance around the warm-up room like a numpty, and there's other fighters getting warmed up kind of in serious mode.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just that little bit of dancing about, it just releases that inhibition just slightly, because you know it's a bit silly. You know it's a bit daft, which, to be honest, it's probably a silly and daft thing to do when you look at it logically fighting. But yeah,
it's one of the things, but it's empty watching it. It brings a bit of a smile. It's funny. It's funny to see. It's because sometimes the sport can be so serious, and it's good to see stuff like that. It's quite light-hearted and fun. As you said, James, did you ever cut any dance moves like that in your time back when you were fighting?
I can't dance for shit, to be honest. I used to sleep in the warm-up room, which was weird because like most people are pretty wired and stuff like that. But I could just put my head down the iPad and go to sleep. And when I woke up, I felt great. I was fine. But I would love to be able to dance. If I could, I would dance all the time.
Just as well, obviously with Cage Warriors, we've had a lot of shows recently. It's good when Cage Warriors have this show to show. It's not like we had during COVID where it was one night after the other, but they've been coming thick and fast. And have you been keeping an eye on the shows? Have you been watching the events, George? Obviously, you're there for Harry's fight. Any fight stood out to you over the piece for Cage Warriors?
Yeah, obviously Harry's fight, Hugh Vachenik, was pretty special. That was a really good fight in terms of, my favourite thing in MMA is when it's not just people going to war, but one person is doing something that works. So the other guy adjusts, and they kind of adjust back and forth. And there was a lot of like clear little adjustments because Vachenik was hitting that right hand and rolling out with a hook. Right hand and roll, and that was his main go-to. And we saw a few just adaptations off Vachenik. There was that uppercut that he started to change to. He started bringing his left hook to the body, or even like dropping his left hook a few inches, like, because he's very big on his counter left hook. I like counter left hook, but not throwing it to the same height. He kind of dropped the left hook a few inches and landed it a few times. Kind of like, I think when Mark Hunt fought Roy Nelson. Yeah, it was Mark Hunt versus Roy Nelson.
Yep.
Between rounds, the corner starts calling him to drop his left hook a few inches, and it starts to land a bit more. And obviously the uppercuts and the knees were a big answer to that. But yeah, that was really good. I've seen a lot of the finishes from the recent Cage Warriors Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, I came in from a really hard week of training. I'm like, no more MMA this weekend. I'm going to wait till the morning to watch the Adesanya fight and all that. But
we'll maybe get some thoughts on that in a minute.
But yeah, came in on a Saturday after a really hard training session, last proper hard training session. I was just out of it in bed, like, yeah, no more MMA today.
And then, James, obviously, we've not really had a chance to talk about that, but obviously, again, it's Scottish interest for us. Rhys McEwen, he came in and got another win, so that's Rhys, another finish as well. It's going well for Rhys at the moment. Do you see improvements fight to fight from Rhys?
He looks like he's getting confident at that level. He had a couple of wee setbacks in the first round and stuff like that, but it looks like he's in better tests. Like we mentioned before, that looked like a step backwards, that test for even the last guy, but it's good that he's getting those fights in there. So I mean, he can find his feet because he's went to regional shows up here to Cage Warriors pretty quick. They're obviously bringing him on at a good pace, and the division's pretty strong at the top end with some good talent up there. But I know they were talking about, there's some guys online talking about him being Nathan Fletcher and stuff like that next. So I think who he gets next will give you an idea of where Ian Dean sees him going and stuff like that. And it'll be another progressive step. But that kid there at the weekend, I can't mind his record. He's not a kid. I think he's a 40-year-old man or something. But
yeah, he's like 36 or 36.
So Kane Rhys was always going to win that fight. And he's progressing at a decent rate. So it's all positive, man. I think try to think what's to do in that show at the weekend. That kid Luke Riley for Next Gen seems like every time you see him, he kind of stands out. He looks like he's going to be exceptional. I don't know if how long he'll be at featherweight for. I know he used to be a bantamweight, but he doesn't look like a massive featherweight, but he's technically very, very good. Obviously the Jim Wallhead thing was pretty cool to see after what he's done in the sport, coming back and winning that fight, and now it sets up a fight with him and Reese. And the main event was it Christian Duncan, I think, is that the kid's name? The light heavyweight or middleweight guy. He's absolutely terrifying. He's brilliant.
Yeah, and obviously the other thing, we'll just finish up on this with the UFC. Great card, lot of finishes, but we'll just keep it down to a couple of fights. Obviously, Dan Hooker got the win and looked like a horrendous. It was a heel hook, wasn't it? He was in. It looked like that get torn apart, but he got the win. And one for you, George, for the lightweights. Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier, obviously batting forwards. Dustin got hurt, but looked like he defended well, and when he reversed it and got Chandler hurt, he obviously ultimately got the finish. Fellow lightweights here, George, what did you think of that fight?
I think there was a lot of because it was looking like the Chandler Bellator fight, where people knew of Chandler's fights from Bellator as, look at these knockouts. What most of his fights were is he'd go hell for leather for a knockout. If he didn't get it, he would take someone down and sit in the guard in the second round and just kind of be gassed and stocky enough and have good enough base to not get swept or let them stand up from underneath him. And he just kind of T-Rex in people's guards for 2 or 3 rounds, like the Goto Yamauchi fight. And I thought, we've seen that now. And then suddenly he had much more developed ground and pound. He was doing a lot more damage off the top position than we'd seen before. There was some weird things from Poirier in that second round as well. Like, you must have expected Chandler to go for the takedown, but there's a point where Poirier builds up to just his elbow, and he just waits there for ages. And then he gets wrist righted and hit with some hard right hands. And it's just quite confusing to see someone that level make a mistake like that, just posting his elbow. It was a good 5-10 seconds, mate. He's going to get wrist righted there. And then he does, and he eats a lot of big shots off that. Somewhat training for Driscoll, expecting to get taken down. I just got the expectation I'm going to get taken down. He's a good wrestler. Just in my head, if I'm building up, I never post on an elbow. I go straight to the hand here, where I'm like far enough away where he can't break a wrist ride on me, like break me down and get a wrist ride. And it was just weird seeing Poirier just hang around on that elbow for a long time and then give away that wrist ride. And then I'd need to rewatch that final scramble. It just seemed like Michael Chandler, he's done this before, where instead of he's got the position to finish the takedown, he goes like 80s action movie and does a load of extra stuff he doesn't need to do, like in the Gaethje fight, and tries to slam him really hard and doesn't help him convert the position. Yeah,
and then we had obviously the Adesanya fight. I think they had Adesanya up on the cards by a good bit, but Pereira sort of done the exact same thing as he done the last time to him. Pereira was behind in their last fight, obviously not MMA, and again he finishes Adesanya in the end. What did you think of the stoppage, James? Do you think the stoppage was a bit premature, or do you think it was stopped at the right time?
I thought it was fair, to be honest. I thought he looked buzzed. He just wasn't defending himself. He wasn't firing back. I don't think him or his camp have complained about it either. Yeah. It's always tricky when somebody gets stopped standing on their feet. Do you know what I mean? It's better that they stop like that than he gets fucking stiffened and poleaxed and he's slumped against the fence. Fucking his legs all bent backwards underneath him and stuff like that. Mark Goddard is closer than anybody else to see it, and sometimes I've read fights before where sometimes you can feel stuff, but it's like you can obviously see things closer up, but sometimes you can just feel the energy for the guys as well. Do you know what I mean? You can feel that he's maybe hurt in a way that you can't actually see. I thought it was perfectly fine, the stoppage, man. I think they'll have to rematch them two, but because I think Pereira might not hold that belt. As soon as anybody who's got a bit of wrestling, Adesanya was taking him down. They gave him into these kind of wrestlers, these he's going to drop that belt pretty quick.
Yeah, by all accounts, it looks like Adesanya is going to take some time. He has been quite active as a champion. He's fought a lot. That was his sixth title fight. Sixth defence rather. So it looks like he's going to take some time. So I think you may see this is an opportunity for another middleweight to step in. But on that note, obviously, George, thank you very much for the time. Fights this Sunday, and that's the 20th of November. So best of luck on Sunday, George, and we appreciate your time in the show.
Thank you for having me.